Well, okay. We've been talking about the cold, and we had the Cold War in Europe, um, and how we were going to block the spread of communism in Europe in post World War II. Then we had the Cold War in Asia and the Civil War in China. Oopsie doopsie, lost that one. Which brings us to the hysteria of the Korean War, and we just got done fighting that one for the better part of 3 years. And we win and we lose at the same time. And now we're going to take a look at Cold War on the home front. So, what did it look like with communism and how America viewed communism in the early 50s? So here we are, Cold War in the United States. The Soviet Union, remember, had been our ally, and this is for the better part of most of America. You did not have the ability to have 24/7 access to news. So the American public was led to believe that the Soviets were our ally. Suddenly, after World War II gets out, they become an adversary, and a very dangerous adversary, one that is getting increasingly more dangerous every day. Finally, in 49, the infamous speech given by Stalin that the two sides, communists and capitalism, will never get along, it'll end in war. And then the Soviets' little secret that they actually had the nuclear bomb too, much earlier than what we thought. They exploded one in 49. The loss of the China regime to communism. We're having a bad couple years here, all led to an incredible big fear of the Soviets and nuclear war. And it'll go from the late 40s to well into the late 50s. In 1947, when it started to heat up between us and the Soviets, Truman responded with what was called the Federal Employee Loyalty Program. And this program was designed to investigate government workers and to be sure that the government itself did not have any spies. It investigated over 3 million of our government workers, and this accusation of being a communist was the equivalent of today's accusation of being, something as grotesque as a child molester or something along that lines, that you were guilty whether you were found guilty or not. People that were viewed as being a severe risk to our society included homosexuals, alcoholics, those who were in debt or needed money. So you were quiet if you had something in your past. And then in the late 40s, the House Representatives had a committee called the Committee on Un-American Activities, or the acronym is HUAC. And this group, HUAC, was charged with examining the internal subversion of the United States. They started looking at the United States and saying, we've got people that are trying to turn us into communists and into at least socialism. And, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Today, you're having quite a debate in the last State of the Union between the Democrats and Republicans and whether or not socialism is on the rise in the United States and that. So it's kind of back. In 1947, the committee turned its attention to looking at primarily the motion picture industry. And the motion picture industry has always been filled with more liberal people. They see things from a much wider perspective. They take all perspectives in, very touchy-feely, and it was a little more accepted in Hollywood. The thinking outside the lines, maybe. And the HUAC committee, the House on Un-American Affairs found that there were 10, and these 10 people that were charged with being communists varied from directors to screenwriters to actors, and these 10 people refused to answer the House committee's questions about were they communist, and if so, were they, who else was with them, and it put a huge scare into the country, and anybody that was associated, accused, or even being suspected as being a communist, again, was blacklisted. Now, they may have not put you in prison, but your employer was told that you were blacklisted, which means you lost your job. Your credit at the bank was gone. Your ability to hang out in the church was affected. Every facet of your life was radically changed. And so America went into a dark shell because everywhere and everything was believed to have a communist sympathizer. And again, Hollywood was a target. And some of your biggest known actors at the time, Gary Cooper, John Wayne, the future president of the United States, a motion picture B-movie actor by the name of Ronald Reagan, all testified that no, they had never taken a script from anybody that had written something sympathetic to communism, but they all acknowledged that communists were in the industry. There was a belief that we had spies everywhere, and the biggest one that you were worried about was spies being in the government and spreading secrets about our nuclear abilities and that. And it's going to come to even a bigger hysteria when the Soviets obtained the nuclear bomb in 1949. We were assured by the government, the military, and the CIA and FBI that this would be at least 10 years before the Soviets would ever have this kind of technology. At the rate where they were at when we had developed the bomb, they were far below us, and yet within less than 5 years, they're exploding one. It got to the point where companies, organizations, all were making their employees or members sign loyalty oath cards to the company, to the country, and to their company. If you didn't sign it, you didn't get the job. Now that today would probably not go over real well. You'd have quite a few people that would charge that to be ludicrousy, but that was the flavor of the American people. One of the most known people was a guy by the name of Alger Hiss, who worked for the federal government and was brought up for lying to the government and charged with perjury when you lie to the grand jury, and he was convicted of spying for the Soviets, and he's a very high up official for the U.S. government. Again, this is fueling the belief of, oh my gosh, we've got them everywhere. Couple that with now Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, a nice little Jewish couple that seemingly were able to get secrets to the Soviets on the nuclear bomb. And from the evidence that I've seen and what they found later, Julius and Ethel were not being good Americans. Old Julius and Ethel were taking secrets out of I believe one of our Northern California nuclear plants and sneaking that off, and they were caught sending it to the Soviet Union. And for that, both Julius and Ethel will be hung. And we'll see if we can see a little movie about that. About this time, we have a gentleman by the name of Joseph McCarthy, who's from the state of Indiana. Wisconsin, I'm sorry. And Mr. McCarthy was a first-term senator, and his term was coming up, and he didn't have really anything to noteworthy to say that he had done, and he seized this communist crusade in the early 50s, and he goes on a rampage and gets America behind him because he starts issuing all kinds of directives and orders that is saying that the government is filled with all kinds of spies, and he got a lot of press, a lot of ink, and he never had any evidence that backed it up. He would change his story repeatedly. But America, again, he was the man because he knew that we had spies in our government. And after having, again, the Soviets develop the bomb, China fall to communism, Russia expanding in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the creation of the Warsaw Pact, those kinds of events, all kinds of money being spent in Western Europe to stop it. People were paying attention to communism. And it was looked upon that you better have a whole lot of feelings of love and camaraderie and the thought that America is a great place. He never identified, Mr. McCarthy would never ever to get one single conviction of anybody. He humiliated some people. He drug them through the mud. He ruined some careers, but he never got a conviction. And Mr. McCarthy kind of lost the favor of the American public when in late 56, he finally accused the U.S. government, the U.S. Army, for having spies. And about that time, he's going to fall completely out of favor with the American public, and he's going to die, I believe, 2 years later of lung cancer and of alcoholism. The entire communism affected every aspect of our lives. In 1961, the Soviets launched the first spaceship out into outer space. And for the better part of 3-4 years, they're the first one to go around the Earth. Kennedy will respond in 62 that he says by the end of the decade, he wanted America to be the first to land on the moon. And Mr. Kennedy did not live to see it, but what a tribute to America and America's commitment and their resolve, because we put an incredible emphasis in our education by spending all kinds of money and a new emphasis placed on math and science within the United States schools. And don't you know it, that in 1969, we step on the moon first? Something that America should be extremely proud of. And that will be a push within education. A lot of money was put into education to further people's understanding of math and science, and then also this incredible race to get to the moon. And we'll leave it there, but now you have just a small taste, and it is a real small taste, of the Cold War at home within the United States. So now you got a Cold War at home, a Cold War in Asia, and a Cold War in Europe. Now we're going to get a really, really close call in Cuba next. So that'll be our next thing we look at. All right?